Close your eyes and imagine you are standing in the midst of Saigon. What do you feel? A source of energy surging through, or a rhythm hustling endlessly? The world calls this place the new dragon of Asia. But to me, Vietnam is simply a smile, knowing how to shine after the rains. How can a country, once enduring many wounds, be able to open its heart to the world so quickly? The secret lies in two words: adaptation. The Vietnamese people are like bamboo, soft before the wind, but resilient before the storm. Today, I do not invite you to learn history. I invite you to step into a story about vitality extraordinary. We will pass through 3 stopovers. Station 1. The Art of Adaptation. From the coffee cup to digital technology. Station 2. Young Vietnamese daring to reach the great ocean. Station 3. Hospitality, the priceless asset of the nation. Before starting, I am curious to know, have you ever felt overwhelmed by the change too rapid of the world? Or are you a person always finding joy in the new things? Please share the feeling of yours. If you love stories slow-paced like this, please stay so that we go together through today's journey. The presence of yours right now is the motivation for me to share beautiful values. Now, brew a cup of tea. Choose a seat truly comfortable. Let us begin. Part 1. The Art of Adaptation. From coffee bean to digital powerhouse. To understand the power of adaptation, we need to rewind the timeline to the 1980s. Let us visualize the context at that time. Vietnam had just emerged from the smoke of war. Everything was scarce, from a bowl of rice to a piece of clothing. In 1986, the renovation policy was enacted. It was like a shower of rain on a drought-stricken land. For the first time, the farmer could master his own land. And from here, the miracle began to appear. Let us speak of the rice grain. First, from a nation that had to import food, living purely for subsistence. Within just a few short years, Vietnam rose up to become the country exporting rice second in the world. That is not only an economic achievement, that is the liberation of labor power, suppressed for so long. But the story most fascinating lies in the coffee bean. Do you know? The coffee tree followed the French into Vietnam since 1857. For over a century, it was merely a drink of luxury, reserved for the aristocracy or Western troops. But the Vietnamese, with creative nature, refused to stand on the sidelines. When the economy opened, the lands of red basalt in the Central Highlands were awakened. Millions of people poured into here to cultivate coffee. They turned Vietnam from zero to become the capital of Robusta coffee, largest on the planet, controlling up to 40% of global output. But the adaptation did not stop at cultivation. It lies in the way of consumption. Western coffee is usually diluted and has a slight acidity. Vietnamese people do not like that. Vietnamese people like a taste that is bold and strong, just like the personality of themselves. But pure coffee is too bitter. What to do? In the difficult period, fresh milk was something of a luxury item no one could afford. Adversity sparked wisdom. People used sweetened condensed milk, a type of milk that can be preserved for a long time without needing a fridge. And thus, iced milk coffee was born. A combination, accidental, but perfect, to the point that culinary experts, top of the world, had to exclaim, "This is the drink. Best of my life." Then comes the story of egg coffee. In Hanoi, when lacking milk, Mr. Jiang, a talented bartender, devised a way to whip egg yolks to substitute, creating a layer of cream, rich and fatty, extremely aromatic, eliminating completely the fishy smell of eggs. That is exactly the pinnacle of adaptation, turning scarcity into uniqueness, turning difficulty into opportunity to shine. Today, when you step into any coffee shop, from the sidewalk to luxury places, you are enjoying the crystallization of history and that creativity. But the flow of history does not stop. If in the 20th century, Vietnamese people adapted via agriculture, then in the 21st century, we adapt via technology. In the early years of the 2000s, when the internet was just budding, Vietnam was still a technological depression. No one believed the boys growing up from rice paddies could write code for computers. But look at the real data. In 2023, the digital economy of Vietnam reached a scale of $30 billion, growing fastest in Southeast Asia. From zero, Vietnam entered the top 30 nations for software outsourcing, leading the world. Try to imagine, in Silicon Valley, an American engineer goes to sleep. Then in Vietnam, a young engineer begins the workday to continue that line of code. This transition happens silently, but fiercely. Giant corporations like Samsung, LG or Intel have bet their future on Vietnam with capital of tens of billions of dollars. Why? Not only because of cheap labor costs, but because of the ability to learn rapidly of the Vietnamese. A Vietnamese engineer can learn a new programming language in just a few weeks. They do not fear difficulty, do not fear suffering, just like their ancestors once did, reclaiming wasteland. This is not a miracle. This is the instinct of survival. When the river changes course, Vietnamese people do not build walls. Vietnamese people build watermills to harness the flow, creating energy for themselves. That is the journey, full of pride. From rice grain to microchip, from bare feet to artificial intelligence. Now, I want to reserve a minute of silence for your own self. Look back at your life. Has life ever thrown at you a bitter taste, unannounced? At that time, will you grimace and resist it like a rock, blocking the water flow? Or will you find a way to add a little sweetness of optimism, to glide away like a bamboo boat? Please share the experience most profound of yours down in the comments below. Philosophy, flexibility, is ultimate power. Charles Darwin once said, "The species that survives is not the species strongest, but the species that adapts best to change." Vietnamese people have proven that truth, by the very history of themselves. Immutable principle, responding to myriad changes. Steadfast mindset, flexible action. That is the key, opening the door to prosperity. Part 2. The generation of global citizens. If Part 1 was the story of material adaptation, then Part 2 is the revolution of human capital, especially the young people. We call them the borderless generation. To understand this change, let us look at the difference between two generations. Their ancestors dedicated their entire youth to preserving the country. In their hands were guns and swords, whereas Generation Z was born when gunfire had ceased. In their hands are smartphones, are laptops, and the aspiration to reach the great ocean. They no longer carry the inferiority complex or fear when stepping into the world. The first barrier that they must break is language. In the 90s, English was something extremely alien. Vietnamese people learned English in a rote manner, knowing how to read and write, but not daring to speak. They feared making mistakes, feared being mocked. But today, everything is different. Please come to Hon Kiem Lake. On the weekend, you will see hundreds of students proactively striking conversations with tourists in English, fluently and confidently. They learn on YouTube, learn via Netflix, learn via games. According to the education organization EF, in 2023, the proficiency index of English of Vietnam skyrocketed, surpassing many countries in the region. This is exactly the invisible passport, helping young Vietnamese go anywhere, do any job. And when the barrier of language is removed, Vietnamese intellect begins to shine. We must mention the new icons of the digital economy. First is VNG, the technological unicorn, first of Vietnam, valued at billions of dollars. They created Zalo, the messaging application, serving over 70 million users, competing on equal footing with the giant Facebook, right on the home turf. This proves the Vietnamese can master core technology, most complex. Next is Sky Mavis, the father of the game, Axie Infinity, a global phenomenon founded by Vietnamese, creating a blockchain game fever all over the world, attracting millions of international players. There were times the company value reached $3 billion, making even Silicon Valley look up in admiration. This is not just success regarding money. This is an affirmation, steely and firm, that Vietnamese intellect is not inferior to anyone. We do not just outsource software. We are creating trends, leading the game. The young generation of Vietnam is becoming global citizens, truly authentic. They sit in coffee shops in Saigon, but are operating projects in New York. They receive salaries in dollars, but spend in Vietnamese dong. They enjoy a life of freedom that their ancestors never dared to dream of. But there is one thing that moves me. That is, no matter how far they go, no matter how successful they become, they are still not assimilated. They eat hamburgers, but still yearn intensely for a bowl of beef pho. They wear Western suits, but on Tet holidays, still want to wear áo đai. To visit grandparents, they speak English like the wind, but are still teary-eyed when hearing a line of folk song. The combination between global mindset and Vietnamese soul has created an identity extremely unique. If the story about Vietnamese bravery has touched your emotions, please support us with a like button right at this moment for the flame of pride to be spread further. The ancients had a saying, "Go really far to return." Do you feel? The more you interact with the modern world, the more you cherish the values rustic of the homeland? Or do you feel you belong to the new things of the world out there? Please share your truest emotions in the comments below. Philosophy. Tree with roots can bloom green branches. Water with source makes wide seas deep rivers. Part 3. The legacy of human love. From pain blossoms compassion. We often ask ourselves, why a nation enduring 1,000 years of war does not nurture hatred? Why those once on the other side of the battle line, when returning to Vietnam, are welcomed like old friends? The answer lies in the healing instinct of the Vietnamese. Harsh history has taught us that when storms and floods strike, when difficulties besiege, money becomes meaningless. Only human love helps us survive. Precisely because of that, hospitality is not a tourism skill. It is a survival reflex. Encoded into the genetic code. Look deeper into the containers of iced tea, free on the sidewalk. The person placing it there could be an old lady selling lottery tickets. Income only a few tens of thousands a day. She does not do so to accumulate merit or seek fame. She does so because she understands the thirst of the passerby. This empathy, the Vietnamese call loving others as loving oneself. This is a living philosophy, paramount, that the modern world is gradually losing. In major cities of the West, people respect absolute privacy, but the price to pay is absolute loneliness. Conversely, in Vietnam, the boundary between stranger and kin is very fragile. A stranger can be invited into the house to eat a meal just after a few stories. Exactly this atmosphere of extended family has healed thousands of lonely souls from around the world. They come here carrying wounds of work pressure, of depression, and they find pain relief medication in the smile of the pho vendor lady, in the shoulder pat of the motorbike taxi uncle. Vietnam is not just a destination. Vietnam is an energy charging station for the soul. Amidst a world becoming increasingly cold with machines and the warmth of the hand of a human is the most luxurious thing, and the Vietnamese are possessing that priceless treasure. Now, please listen to the voice inside you. Do you feel the world out there is operating too fast, making humans gradually drift apart? Or do you still believe that selfless kindness always exists, even in places you least expect? Please share the truest vibrations of yours in the comments below. Philosophy. The wealthiest person is not the person having much wealth, but is the person giving the most. Outro. So we have together walked through a journey full of meaning and excitement. From spectacular adaptation to tolerant kindness. I do not want to end this video with a goodbye. I want to send you an invitation. Try once to come and feel, not through the screen, but with your very heartbeat. Let Vietnam touch you in the most unique way. If today's story has sown in your heart a positive seed, nurture it by pressing the subscribe button. For Daily Life Stories channel, your presence in this community is the motivation for us to continue the mission of telling stories, healing the world. Thank you for staying until the last minute. Goodbye, and see you again in New Horizons.